afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're joining us in another time zone or watching the webinar replay. And welcome to another another NDIS Cup of questions. Getting a little tongue twisted there. And I'm joined once again by the lovely Elisa James from Plan Tracker, who this week is joining us from the fantastic Plan Tracker office. And Elisa, I believe you've transitioned back in. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
It is so nice. I have to admit, I am missing my slippers and my large fridge because I've had to make my lunch and bring it in. But to be back in the office after months, what feels like months at home, is fantastic. So as you know, we've still got lots of team at home. We're only able to open half our New South Wales office. So it's an interesting space, isn't it? This juggle transition back into the new normal.
It definitely is. And look, I think we're all going to see that transition where we come back into workplaces or school environments and the community, and then we might go out for a few days or a week or so and then come back in. So it's going to be a little bit of to and fro for a little while yet, but we're very excited to have our team back in the New South Wales office, at least partially at the moment. And we're also excited to have you joining us for another couple of questions today. Just while everyone is joining us for the session, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have or haven't joined us before, if you'd like to ask any questions to the team live on air, we have Justine from the Plan Tracker team joining us in the chat box this afternoon. You can pop the questions in the chat or the Q&A section, so you'll find them at the bottom of your screen. We will be answering some of those live as we go along, as well as in the Q&A at the end. If it's anything super personal and specific, we'll come back to you personally after the webinar, and Justine will be answering those as well for the team as we go along. But we've got some fantastic content for you today. So Elisa, if you're ready, I'm going to pop the slides up on our screen for everyone, and I think we might jump in because there's been some really important system updates and there's a bit of confusion going on. So let me grab that for us now. My screen is going well. Here we go. Oh, my screen's just going to give us a minute. Here we go. There we are. It's coming. That's technology for us. So let's jump those in nice and big there.
Looking good, Mel.
Fantastic. Lovely. I love to have the feedback that you guys can see what we're sharing on our screen. So we're going to jump right on into that hot topic, and there's a lot of confusion, and I just want to say you're not alone. So there has been an announcement from the agency that on May 9, there was going to be a system update that made some changes to the core budget for some participants. Now, Elisa, I'd love to hear from you. Who did that apply for, and what happens if I can't see it in my account?
Okay, so Mel, yeah, I mean, we were confused. The information coming through as to what had changed took a few days to figure out and work out exactly what had happened. We knew that there were system changes coming to core, and the reason for those, of course, was our favorite topic of can I buy a device? So that was kind of the starting prompt, and the agency came up with what was a really good solution, which was if you already had a core budget, but you didn't have a consumables budget as part of core, then on, I think actually it was May 7 on the Saturday, they rolled over and made it so that you would have access to a consumables budget. So we'll talk about whether you see that or not in a moment. But because of the way the business system works for the NDIS, they weren't able to just give you consumables. Any other budgets that you didn't have were also given at the same time. So if you only had daily activities but not social and community participation, then you will have seen that you've now got access to social and community participation as well. And of course, one of our favorite topics, and I say that a little tongue-in-cheek because how many policies changes can one topic have? Transport. So participant transport, that second budget in the core was equally granted to pretty much everybody. If you had one budget in core, you will now have all budgets available in core. Now, that bodes the question, if I go into the portal as a participant, can I see that? So again, it depends, as often the answer does, it depends on how your plan is managed, how the funding is managed in your plan. So if you have a core that's agency managed, then it means that when providers go in to make bookings, they'll be able to see those budgets and make bookings against them. If your plan is plan managed, then you may not see that budget appear until it's been added in by your plan manager. Either way, it doesn't matter. Just know that it's there and know that it's flexible. So the logistics will kind of take care of themselves. Your overall amount of your core didn't change. So you've still got the same amount. It's just that now you can claim under some of those other categories.
Fantastic. And
self-management.
I was about to say, I think we've missed out our self-managers.
We missed out self-managers. Sorry, self-managers. We love you to bits.
So for anyone who's self-managing, I know we've had this question a lot in the community online. Why can't I see this change? Has it not applied to me?
So that's a really actually great question. It hasn't. And not entirely sure why that happened or was done the way it was, but what we've heard from the agency has been that sometime in, I think, June, is that right, Mel?
It is indeed.
June 2020, this year. So good thing the year's on there. Those budgets will also be made available to self-managers. We don't know what day, haven't had any updates on that, but as soon as we do, we'll let you know.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for clarifying that, Elisa. Now, I know we've talked about this topic a lot in these sessions, as we have had many phone calls and talked about this online in the social media communities as well. But what I'd love to hear from you around assistive technology, we've spoken a lot about devices and those sorts of things. What else can I buy outside of a device with this funding that's available to me?
Mel, it is a really good question. Assistive technology, it's kind of a funny name because even though it's called assistive technology or AT for short, it really doesn't mean that it has to be electronic and something that you can charge. So it's not just pieces of electrical equipment, devices, computers, those type of things. It means really anything tangible that you hold in your hands that is going to last for a while. So not a consumable like nappies or incontinence products would be, for example, but something that you can purchase, a tool or device that you can use to assist you. So the first thing is, as with all of your NDIS funding, it's always there to bridge that gap between disability and an ordinary life. Now, there's no shopping list, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week, didn't we?
We did indeed.
And that's without rehashing too much, that's a really good thing that there isn't a shopping list of what can I or can't I buy. So what are the parameters? So the parameters are, obviously you need to have a consumables budget, which if you have a plan with a core budget, you will now have a consumables budget. If you don't have core, then this is something you would be best to prepare for at your next plan review and make sure you've got an idea of the sorts of things you might like to purchase, and let your LAC or early years coordinator know so that you can hopefully get consumables in your next plan. So the sorts of things, generally we use the Participant Guidebook 3, and in Participant Booklet 3 there are 7 questions that you need to consider when you think about what can I spend my funding on. Is the device or the thing you're going to buy, does it help you to increase in your independence? Is it safe? Does it help you participate better in society? There's some of the questions. Is it good value for money? So for example, what might be a disability support for one person may not be for another. So noise cancelling headphones is often a great example we use. Because that may be something that's life-changing for someone. It means they can go into noisy spaces without being overwhelmed. Therefore, even though it's a mainstream product, you can buy it at JB Hi-Fi or Harvey Norman or on an online retailer, but it means that for that person it becomes a disability support. So the general caveats or guidelines around how to use that funding, each individual item can be up to $1,500. Generally, the NDIS won't fund the top of the range product. It'll be the product that meets your needs at kind of that entry level. So if you're in doubt, sometimes getting good advice around the types of equipment or AT that could be useful for you, chat with your therapists. They have great ideas. They know usually your situation far better than most other people do. Obviously, you know your own situation, that's equally important. But if you're looking for ideas around things that might help, therapists can be often quite helpful in that space.
Fantastic. And now I know we've obviously got this up on the slide on screen. Part of the criteria under claiming for an assistive technology item under consumables, or I believe there's another budget, Elisa. I just wanted to double check to clarify for everyone. If I don't have a core budget, is there another area in my capacity building that I can claim assistive technology under at the moment?
So at the moment, you can claim for devices up to $750 for one device to help you with telehealth or teletherapy out of your therapy budget, which is also called improved daily living or CB daily activities, just because we like to name things twice. And so that's available through there. At the moment, there's a little bit of lack of clarity as to whether you can claim for other AT under there, and we've had mixed answers. The official publication at the moment says just for devices, but we do know that a number of conversations with people on the 1-800 number for the agency are giving some information saying, yes, you can claim other devices. So our suggestion, if you are wanting to purchase something else from that budget and you've made a call to the 1-800 number, is get a call number. Keep a receipt number for that call. Just because at the moment it's a little bit contradictory.
Lovely. I think that's really great advice for everyone. And if you are looking for the specific criteria for what the NDIS needs in terms of their criteria for purchasing an assistive technology item, Justine, I'll just invite you to pop the link up to the article and a free written advice template for your provider as well in the chat box. So if anyone is looking for more information there, you can grab that in the chat box now. Elisa, I know there was also, it came out originally in a provider news flash, and then we did find it albeit we think a little temporarily on the NDIS website with regards to assistive technology being included in auto plan extensions. So do you mind giving us an update on what's going on there?
Okay, so there is another budget called assistive technology, which is different to, let's put it this way, assistive technology under the NDIS comes in 4 levels. Levels 1 and 2 are generally things that are under $1,500 in price, not customized. You can buy them off the shelf, so you don't have to have it specifically built for you or those things. You can trial it often. It's usually a stock standard thing that you can buy from any retailer. There are also some small ramps, some shower rails, some really kind of basic, that off the shelf but might need an installation type product. So those that can come out of your consumables budget. The other area of assistive technology looks after what we call level 3 and level 4 of AT, and they come under their own special budget. Now, historically, to have something approved that was over $1,500 or considered higher risk, you would need to go through an assistive technology approval process, which generally involves having an assessment done by an appropriate AT assessor, which might be a podiatrist for AFOs, or it might be an OT for bathroom modifications or similar. Or for a particular wheelchair or hoist or any of those sort of bigger pieces of equipment that are higher risk. So what happens there is that what has happened there is that budget, if you haven't used it at the moment and you're coming up to end of plan, there's a couple of things that can happen. The reason, obviously, COVID's kind of impacted everybody, and so if you haven't been able to use that budget, then there are some guidelines in place as to what will happen when your plan rolls over. So we're going to talk a little bit more about plan review rollover later, Mel, but suffice to say, if the money is there, some of that may roll into the next plan. So you don't need to panic too much about trying to get things done at the end of this plan. Although, often with NDIS funding, getting it done when the funding's there is also a good option. One thing I would like to say, just to finish off the AT kind of area, is that because the AT team who had to read all these assessments at the agency got swamped, and that meant delays for people being able to access much needed equipment. What they did is probably about middle of last year, I think it was, introduced this mid-tier, I think it's about October, introduced like a mid-tier cost for AT. So they said anything that's from 1,500 to, is it 2,500?
I think so.
5,000. Well, now I'm having a mental blank. It's a little while since we've had one of these. Let's say 2,500, but we'll figure it out. We'll let you know. Anyway, that mid-tier cost. What they said is, if you've got something, a piece of equipment that might fit into that price range, rather than have to go through a great big assessment process, which often can be almost as expensive as the price of something at $2,000. That you can actually submit quotes and a letter of support from a therapist at your plan review and have that identified and added into your next plan without having to go through the whole big assessment, the whole big AT assessment process. So again, being prepped for plan review makes a lot of sense.
Wonderful. It's really good to know that mid-tier is there. And what we'll do for everyone is I'll confirm that on the webinar recording for you all. So there'll be a nice little pop-up on the screen there. Now, Elisa, just before we get off this topic, we've got one more thing I'd like to address, and we've also got a question coming in from Beth. So Beth, we'll come to you in just a moment. But we get this question a lot, and I know it continues to come in. We've said the answer in a numerous number of ways. The NDIS is very clear on it, but I'm going to ask again. Can I pay for the internet using my funding?
Oh, Mel, a very popular question at the moment. The NDIS has very, very clearly come out and said that internet access is considered a regular household expense and not claimable from NDIS funding.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the clarity there. And Justine in the chat box has just confirmed for us that from October 2019, that mid-tier AT that Elisa was talking about is $1,500 up to $5,000. So thank you so much for that clarity, Justine. Now coming across to Beth's question. So Beth, thank you so much for reaching out in the chat box today. This is in regards to, I'm guessing, flexibility with your consumables budget. So Beth has mentioned that she's got a small budget in consumables that was originally for shoes. With the new flexibility that's come in, does that mean she has the opportunity to use that funding for something else, such as lycra sheets, if that's what's been recommended to her?
So it's not even new flexibility there, Beth, that makes that change. The only time that you have limited flexibility or limited choice and control around how you spend your funding is if the planner has made a particular thing stated. So for example, if you read your plan, and not many plans have stated items, but if you have plan management, you'll see that the plan management items are stated. And what that means is that the planner has said that particular amount of money can only be used for that particular item code and purpose. So it's not that common to have stated items. When the planner has done their job of making the plan, and that's when they apply that reasonable and necessary framework, when they've done that, after the point you get the plan, at that point your guiding decision making should be around those questions that are covered in, again, participant booklet 3. And then you have choice and control. So if your needs change mid-year and you no longer need shoes, or your son no longer needs shoes, and instead you would like to choose to purchase a different support, as long as you meet the criteria that it is a disability support for him, he needs it because of disability, then in that case, it makes sense that you can go ahead and make a different choice there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for clearing that up for us. And Beth, we hope that answers your question today. Now, Elisa, I know that we had a fantastic story shared with us in regards to assistive technology over the past week. Are you happy to share with us a little bit about that story, if you don't mind?
Mel, I would love to, but I'm going to muck up the details. Could I hand that one back to you?
You definitely can.
It's been a busy week in the Plan Tracker office this week.
It definitely has, and we're very excited to have everyone back in the office, which is also very good. So I'm happy to take that one. So, Kerry, we just wanted to say thank you for reaching out to us last week following the session. You reached out to us regards a great kind of positive outcome that you'd had with regards to assistive technology. So Kerry mentioned that her son, who was unable to go to the gym and to continue swimming sessions with the physio during this time, hired a treadmill with his funding. So it's the best thing we ever did, is what Kerry said. And we are so happy to hear that that is the outcome for you.
Mm.
Besides physical fitness, Kerry has also mentioned the mental well-being and health benefits as well for her son. So it's really great to have that kind of outcome. And I know you had a lot of support from your wonderful coordinator as well, Kerry. So we just wanted to give a shout out to Jessica, who's supporting you. And also just to mention a platform that Kerry has introduced us to that I personally hadn't heard of, Elisa, and I wanted to know if you
Oh.
had. So Peer Me Up, which is a support kind of provider who connects young people with other young people as their support workers in kind of a peer environment. I hadn't heard of it. You can check it out online if you just search for Peer Me Up. Really great initiative. I really loved it. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that company as well. And once again, Kerry, just to thank you for sharing that story. Anyone else who would like to share any stories with us, whether they're about assistive technology or anything else, there'll be a lovely form on the replay page for you to do that. And we'd love to hear from you. We really love to hear all of the stories of what's working for you and what are you finding this flexibility is useful for. So,
And what a great
really great.
strategy, Mel, choosing to
Yeah.
rent the treadmill so that you haven't got this big capital outlay. Even if you're using consumables, some of those pieces of equipment are quite pricey. Plus, it means that at the end of COVID, there's still encouragement not to necessarily just stay at home, but to get back out into community and doing your exercise and engaging there, which is, a great thing. So yeah, really great story. Thanks, Kerry.
Awesome. All right. Now, next topic I'd love to jump into is all about planning spending. And we've talked about last week during our session, which was particularly for parents, around all the what ifs going on right now, particularly around social anxiety and those sorts of things. But there's always a lot of what ifs and what happens if I, and end that sentence in any number of ways that you might like to. So I thought we might go through some of the top questions that we're getting with the what ifs. So what happens if I cancel a service or support shift? So I think we might clarify here that there's two sides to this story. So if you cancel last minute, Elisa, do you mind telling us what happens if we do it, say, within 24 or 48 hours?
So we're assuming you is the participant here, and not the provider. So let's say for whatever reason in this current COVID season that you need to cancel a therapy appointment list or a support worker shift, whatever it might be. Previously, there were limits around how far before the appointment that a provider could potentially charge you a cancellation fee. Because of COVID, what the agency has done is extended those dates quite a lot. So what they didn't want is everybody having to cancel shifts because of social distancing and ISO and all those things, and therefore having providers suddenly without income. So as a way of helping to keep our providers strong through this time, which is essential for all of us, we're coming out the other side, but we need all of our support workers and providers strong. So what the agency has changed is that you can now be charged a cancellation fee up to 10 working days prior to the date of your appointment. So not if the provider cancels, but if you as a participant, the recipient of that shift or that work, choose to cancel, the provider can charge you for that cancellation. It used to be that they could only charge 90%, but they can now charge up to 100% for that cancellation. Of course, we would always say that, great relationships are all about communication. So we would hope that providers are communicating really clearly with you and that you're not going to get surprised by a cancellation fee. And hopefully they'll, have kind of covered it off with you ahead of time rather than just sending you an invoice, which can be a little painful. So
Wonderful. And just for clarity on the end of that, and thank you, first of all, for prefacing that we were talking as the participant there. If I'm a provider and I cancel a support shift because, say, my worker's called in sick and I don't have anyone to replace them, what happens then?
Pretend I was just completely reading the chat right then and getting really interested in the CPAP conversation and totally missed what you said.
Love your honesty. Maybe some more coffee for you.
I tried to have more coffee and I was told that I would now need a tea. We just bought a new coffee machine for the office and I'm definitely testing it out. It seems to be pretty good so far.
All right, just working it in. That's nice and easy. All right. So I just wanted to clarify for everyone, if my provider cancels the shift, so if it wasn't me as the participant,
yes.
If my provider cancels, what happens? Are they still going to charge me?
No.
Do they not charge me? They're not going to?
No charge. Yeah, if the provider cancels and is unable to deliver the support, then that's not on you as a participant. That's on the provider.
Okay, wonderful. Alrighty. So the next what happens if question that we've been getting a lot over the phone, on social media chats and those sorts of things is, if I haven't spent my funding during COVID-19 or due to it, maybe I couldn't get support workers to come into my home, whatever the situation might have been, and my plan's literally coming to an end, what's going to happen for me? Am I going to lose that funding or something else?
So I think the first thing that's really worth talking about here, Mel, is what happens at the end of a plan. So there's a couple of things that can happen. Obviously, currently, my understanding is we haven't resumed any face-to-face planning meetings with LACs or early years providers. That might be different in your area. If it has, we'd love to know, so just let us know. But generally, the feeling of most of the community partners is that they're working remotely. So when you're coming up to the end of your plan, there's two possible things that can happen. Either you'll have a plan review meeting, which might be done over the phone, or it might be done over Zoom or similar type online chat. If that's the case, what I would suggest, if you get a call you're coming up to the end of your plan and you get a call from your LAC or your early years partner, and they're just saying, can we have a chat about your plan? Just really clearly ask them, is this my plan review conversation? Because we have heard a few stories of people being surprised that they just had a chat and then all of a sudden here's a new plan in the mail. So rather than be surprised, just ask the question, is this my plan review meeting? Because you may want to present some other information or raise some needs that were not raised last year in last year's plan. Things might have changed for you. So I think that's really important to know. If that happens, then you would get a new plan, just like you would on any year. It's just that the delivery of the conversation is happening digitally or remotely rather than face-to-face. The other thing that can happen is if you haven't heard from your LAC or early years person that you get to the end of your plan, don't worry, your plan won't just end and you'll be left out high and dry. Your plan will do what's called an automatic rollover. And that generally is happening, an automatic plan extension. It generally is extended for a year. Sometimes if you've requested it, it can be extended for 2 years. And on that, what that seems to be is literally just a cookie cutter repeat of last year's plan. So with some small increases for CPI, for example. If you have some funding left in assistive tech, in not in your consumables for the low cost, low risk, under $1,500 space, not that space, but the assistive technology budget, there was a bit of confusion around that, and there was concern that if you hadn't purchased the piece of equipment that you needed within the plan, that you would lose that money. I'm going to read from my notes because, figures and they've changed them regularly. So here we go. If you have already had that AT support in the current plan and it's about to be auto extended, then up to, let me see, hang on, Assistive Tech, this will be up to the value of $3,000 if 50% or more was utilized in the previous plan. So if you used more than 50% of the funding you were given in the previous plan, then you will probably receive $3,000 into your or up to $3,000 in your plan extension. Now, we're not talking about a specific piece of equipment. So if you've had a hoist funded, for example, and it's been approved, then and it hasn't yet gone through, it's likely that that will still continue. We're talking about that repairs and maintenance to equipment, or that that extra chunk that you can often get in that assistive technology budget, especially where you've got equipment that's expensive to maintain. It will be capped at $3,000. If less than this amount was in the previous plan, then the lower amount. So if you only had $2,000 last time, then it's likely you would get that $2,000 for repairs and maintenance type things again. Specific assistive technology items will be duplicated in the new plan. Yeah, so really, you can also on this, because it's so specific for each person, if you're at all worried about it, do reach out to your LAC or your early years partner, or give the 1-800 number a call. Again, they're now giving receipt numbers on those calls, so our recommendation is any call to 1-800, get that receipt number, because then you can go back and say, well, I called on this day, here's my number, and there's a history of it on the system. So that's a new thing that hasn't been around for too long, but we're very grateful to see it there.
We sure are, and definitely great advice for anyone calling in. Just to get a record of that number, just pop it down on your notes or on your invoice if you're calling about something specific. Always good to have that reference point. Now, the other question that we've been getting a lot, Elisa, is, and there's some caveats to this question, it's what happens if I want to change the way my funding is managed? So if I'm agency managed and I want to go to plan or self-managed as an example, because I'm wanting more flexibility, has that process changed at this point for me to request that change?
Yeah, look, the agency seems to have made that a whole lot easier because they realise that you maybe have a plan that's currently agency managed, and therefore finding it harder to find providers if you're limited to only registered providers. At this time, some of those registered providers may not be as available to you, and so having more flexibility makes sense. So you can simply request a change to plan management or self-management. We've heard that that's coming through a lot more easily now. Previously, it would have evoked, depending on how far through you were, if it was like the first couple of weeks and whoops, they made it one and you want the other, generally they can change that over pretty quickly. But right now they're making those extra changeovers pretty quickly.
Fantastic. Now, the other question we do get is if I don't have funding available, whether I don't have enough funding left or I'm wanting the inclusion of a particular budget. This one comes specifically around devices usually. Can I ask for a review solely for the inclusion of an assistive technology device such as a laptop or a tablet?
So to avoid massive overload is probably the agency's motivation on this one. They have been really clear that they will not do an early review just because you're requesting additional $750 for assistive tech for a device. They've made that really, really clear. However, they have also made it really clear that if because of COVID or just because of this current crazy scenario, you're running out of funding, your prices have increased, things are costing you more for the supports that you need, or your support needs have changed because of COVID, then in that case, you can request a review.
Fantastic. And now we've got actually one live question coming in from Anna here, which I'm just going to pop in if you're open to that, Elisa. And Anna,
Sure.
Thank you so much for reaching out with this question. It's in regards to getting back into the community, kind of, I don't want to say post-COVID yet, but kind of during COVID at the moment as we transition back into a very new version of normal in the community. So Anna's asked, can she use her funding if she's self-managed to do online courses such as art courses and those sorts of things?
And that's a really good question, and it's a question we're getting quite a lot at the moment, is around online courses of all sorts of shapes and sizes. The first thing we would point back to is to say, remember that your NDIS funding is there as that bridge between disability and ordinary life. So it's there to fund your disability supports. So it might be, and again, this is why we can only make general comments in this situation, because I can see you've asked specifically around an art type course. So the NDIS would probably take the approach that says if you are engaging an art therapist, then that would be covered under your improved daily living or your CB daily activities therapy budget. If you're looking at simply doing a course, is the course providing a disability support? Now, depending on what budgets you have, will depend on whether you should be claiming that. If you're simply wanting to claim it out of core, possibly not. But if you needed somebody to assist you to attend the course or assist you to be able to access the course, they will often pay for that support. So it's that support that you need because of disability in order to be able to access something that others would equally engage with as a mainstream activity. If you needed different equipment or modified equipment because of disability, then you might be able to fund some of that modified equipment in that low cost, low risk range. But simply just saying, I'd like to do an art course and therefore purchasing paints and other things generally wouldn't be considered a disability support. But again, I'm speaking very generally right now. You know, for people who have the improved social and community budget, that's a capacity building budget. That's a space where you can use quite innovative approaches to reaccessing community if that's been a challenge for you. And we've seen people do all sorts of innovative things in that space, which can often involve mainstream courses and mainstream group experiences.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elisa. And Anna, I know that was obviously we can't be super specific, so it was general information for everyone's benefit here. But if you are looking for more information in regards to what Elisa mentioned there, with the differences between disability specific and disability related supports, we did do a segment on that in our last NDIS Cuppa questions. You can catch the replay on the Plan Tracker website. That session was on the 12th of May. You'll find all of that information on our site there. So what we're going to jump into next, which I know is your favorite topic, absolutely hands down, Elisa, is transport. So
Mel,
I know you love it. I know we all love it. I think we should go back here again for the umpteenth time this year.
You have inspired me with the car, though. I think the car is kind of cute.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was a little bit fun for probably a not so fun topic that we talked about a lot. So I thought we'd start with clarification here because this confuses a lot of people, myself included. I am often caught out saying this the wrong way around, so I will try my best here. What is the difference between provider travel and participant transport?
All right. Well, you got those two round the right way, so that's awesome. A really great start, Mel. Okay, so, and the reason I'm a bit groany around this is because up until the middle of last year, so July 1 last year, this was really not such a hard space and it kind of made sense, and there was a lot of grey in this area, which made it a lot more livable for most people as participants. And then the agency decided to bring in some really tight policy that just made it quite unworkable. And we spent, I think, about 8 months answering questions around how come I can't pay for mileage when I go somewhere with my support worker, for example, or kilometres. And that then situation changed again back in March this year with, again, a change of policy, but not a great change of policy, kind of a half change of policy, which is, well, okay, you can you can claim kilometres if you are a participant travelling with your support worker, but only if you're going to an NDIS funded support. So not to go and visit Aunt Martha, for example. So let's start at the top. Provider travel. Provider travel is where a provider, whether that's a therapist or a support coordinator or a support worker perhaps, travels to get to you. In other words, if they're doing a shift with you that might be maybe a 2-hour shift, for example, they've got to have a lot of time in the day where they have to jump in the car and change between clients. And so the agency recognises that that's a cost to them as a business. And so put in some caveats to say, if you as a provider need to travel to visit the participant or person in their own home, then you can charge the person up to 30 minutes travel time. So that if you were, let's say therapy, let's say you were charging, you know, $197 or whatever we're up to. No, we're now at $214 or something like that. And for 30 minutes, you could charge the equivalent of half of that hourly rate for provider travel. There are slightly higher limits for remote and very remote travel. And there's a couple of strange rules around if it is the last visit of the day, being able to charge you to both to get to you and to get back to the office. So you could end up with an hour charge. Again, communication. Make sure when you're engaging with somebody, especially if you're having them come to their home, that you're both clear on will provider travel be charged, and just make sure that you're within those kinds of limits. Okay, participant transport. So it's kind of as it says in the name. It's if you are a participant and you head off to do something out of the house with your support worker, and they're driving you in their own car, for example, then you can claim mileage. What that looks like is that the provider would usually, let's say support worker, because that's the easiest example, would usually charge that at, and there's no set rate for this, but the agency recommends 85 cents per kilometre. So if you travelled 15 kilometres for your trip out to do whatever you were doing, to go shopping or something like that, then the support worker would generally include that 15 kilometres times 85 cents on their invoice. So participant transport is generally when you are with the provider and you're traveling, if you're the participant, you're traveling with them in their car.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And for everyone who is listening, whether you're joining us live or watching the replay, we hope that kind of nuts out some of the popular questions that we're getting. Now, we do have a few specifics quickly, Elisa. So one that we've had come through was, can a provider claim for transport if the support worker goes to the shop for me, but I don't go with them? So if I'm the participant, my support worker is going to the shops for me, can the provider be charging me transport at that point?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
Especially in this season of COVID-19, you can also claim back some delivery fees as well if you're not able to go to purchase the things you need to purchase. So delivery fees on shopping, food shopping, for example, those types of things. So yes, generally we would put that through. Often, certainly as a plan manager, it's not usually going to be itemized on an invoice, whether you were with your worker at the time or not. They would just be charging it as worker hours. But yeah, look, it's a pretty legitimate cost to the worker or to the provider of those supports. So we would expect to see it on there.
Wonderful. All right. And the next question I've got for you are also transport, because we love these questions. If I'm using the social and community transport, so if I'm using budget 4 under my core, so not budget 2, do I have to have the support worker with me? And this question, just for a bit of foundation here, came up from a participant who has now gained access to the transport category under their core following the changes that came in. And just a caveat for everyone, the participant is plan managed. So if you're self-managed, you're still waiting till June 2020. And we unfortunately don't have a date right now, but plan managed participant is our example. So yeah, do I have to have that support worker with me? So you touched on that before with regards to.
So this is where it gets, so we've done the simple bit. Now is where it gets a little bit more complex. So how good would it be if you just had one big bucket of funding and you just said, I'm just going to use it for disability supports? That would be great, but we're not there yet. So if you are, let's say you go with your worker and you go shopping, all right, standard example, and you go with your support worker, then in that case, as a plan managed, if your plan is plan managed, then we would simply code that under that social and community participation out of core. And because you're going and doing an NDIS funded support, because you're with your support worker and you're going shopping, then it makes sense. That's all NDIS funding. Then we can claim the kilometres for you. The transport budget, which is a different budget under core, and which is one that many people who've never had that budget before now suddenly have, courtesy of the weekend of the May 7 to 9 update. So that budget, some people will actually already be receiving that budget, but they're receiving it as a periodic payment. So a fortnightly payment into your bank account is how you might be receiving it. If that's the case, nothing has changed for you. In that case, you can still use that budget. It's for things where you are going to visit Aunt Martha's, but because of disability, you need to take an Uber rather than being able to say, use the bus. So you could use that for taxi fares, Uber or similar, or bus fares, any transport cost you like. And if you're receiving that as a fortnightly bank payment into your bank account, then that hasn't changed. The amount that you receive hasn't changed, and that's the total amount you will be able to use for transport funded by the agency. So what has changed? If you are a person who didn't have that periodic payment, you now have, and you had a core budget, you now have a transport budget. So that's actually impacted for a lot of kids. A lot of teenagers have now suddenly got a transport budget for the first time. So what does that mean? So that transport budget is used a little bit differently, or can be used a little bit differently to how simply going to the shops with your worker and charging mileage. So for example, if you do want to go and visit Aunt Martha and you need to take an Uber, then, and you have that budget, you could now claim the cost of that Uber from that transport budget. It doesn't require you to be going to an NDIS funded event or funded support service because it's simply a transport fee being charged. So the useful thing is that you're not limited to the amount you could claim for transport because all of our core supports are flexible, and obviously there's no additional funding coming in. It's still the same core amount that you have. But if you said, look, I'm not using that much on social and community, I don't need to take a worker with me, but I really do need help to get there by using a different form of transport, you could now do that and move some money, or your plan manager would move some of that money into your transport budget.
Wonderful. And I have one final question, which isn't on the list.
Really?
So this is a surprise.
Isn't that all of transport?
So for a participant who already had transport and they're receiving a regular fortnightly instalment, with the changes that came in, and I did go and double check dates just for clarity for everyone, it was the weekend of May 9 and 10 being the Saturday, Sunday. I had to look at a calendar.
Mel needs to be completely accurate. That's perfect. I love it.
I like dates and I like them to be
all right, May 9.
Certain. So May 9 and between somewhere May 9 and May 10, these changes came in from the agency through their system. So if just coming back to the question, if I'm a participant with the transport funding, so 04 budget, and I receive it as a fortnightly 02 budget, I told Justine I'd do that the wrong way around, and I definitely just did. If I receive it as a fortnightly instalment already, am I still going to get the same flexibility, or is there a way that I can change my budget to being plan managed so that I get access to more funding?
Yeah, generally, if you do want to change that budget from, look, one of the great things about having it come into your bank account is that you don't need to account for it. So you don't need to keep receipts. You don't need to track it. It's just there and available as you need it. That's the good side of the flexibility. The less flexible part is that you can't increase it. So if that funding is insufficient, you can't use some of your other core support towards it. So the only way to overcome that is to change to have that budget plan managed, assuming you're using a plan manager, in which case you need to go and request a review to change the way that the funding is managed.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I think we might leave transport there. That's been a lot of information. If you do have any more questions on transport.
Can we not talk about transport next week?
I might give you a break. Something I'd love to touch on just as we wrap up today's session is in regards to support coordination and the LAC changes. So for anyone in New South Wales, we just wanted to reiterate that from the 1st of July, there'll be some new local area coordinator contracts coming into force. So for some participants, this means that you'll roll across to the new provider. I believe Social Futures is taking over some of the contracts in New South Wales specifically. For others, you'll stay and remain with your current LAC provider. So either the new or your current will be contacting you to advise you either way on that. We just wanted everyone to be abreast of what had gone on there. But something, Elisa, I wanted to pick your brains around because I spotted this earlier today. Accessing support coordination from core. So there's been some wording which we've copied and pasted, which is on the slide from the NDIS website directly this morning. What is going on in terms of accessing? Do I now need permission to access?
Oh, Mel, and this is the yes. We're not big fans of this little slow release, unannounced changes in policy that the agency seems to love. It would be so much easier if it was a little more upfront. Anyway, so what we're reading is that if you have so recap. Originally, only people who had support coordination. Support coordination, for those who don't know, is where you can find a support coordinator who's a professional who can help you to find the supports you need. So if you're needing a great team of support workers and you're struggling to do that, they can help with that. If you're needing to find a builder to help with some home modification quotes, that's a space they can help with. They're very good at helping you to think about the types of supports you might need in place, and then helping you to think about where you might find them, or they might help you to find them from. So if you had a support coordination budget, which I think at last count it was around about 47% of plans did, not many children, mostly adults, then that was fine. But what the agency has recognised is that with all of the disrupt that COVID-19 has caused, is that people might be struggling to find support, and they want to make sure that people have the right supports in place that you need. And so they opened up 3 line items, in core, so that if you have a core budget, you can now use a support coordinator. And that was all kind of nice and straightforward. However, we've just noticed this slight change in wording that's come through. We wanted to alert you to, which is that if you do not have support coordination in your plan but require additional assistance, you should first contact your LAC or your ECEI, which is your early years partner. So chances are that most of those conversations are going to be a 2-minute phone call where they say, I'm not really sure, you could engage and go ahead and engage a support coordinator. In which, yes, how it's going to roll out, whether someone's going to check or not, I don't know. But we just thought we'd alert you to this. Just slightly, it's like policy by drip feed, I think.
That's the wording I was thinking of. It feels like drip feed, and you have to play I Spy on the website sometimes.
That's right.
But that's why our team does our best to provide these sessions and keep you up to date with what we're spotting and spying throughout the midst of all this information, just to keep you as up to date as we can. Now, Elisa, I just wanted to touch on a topic that's been very heartbreaking, that we've heard news come out of South Australia recently, and our thoughts and prayers are with the family during this time. It's really devastating to hear. I believe, though, the NDIS, as a result of this, have reinforced and reiterated some reporting requirements for support coordinators as well. Did you just want to briefly touch on that for us?
Yes, so even if you are using your core for support coordination does have requirements, and those requirements are still required, even if you're using core as opposed to support coordination budget. So support coordinators are expected by the agency to be really proactive in making sure that, and making multiple attempts to make sure that all of the participants that they're engaged with are okay and are fully supported. So if you've got a support coordinator, I'm sure by now you will have heard from them. The other thing is that if they can't contact you as a participant, then the support coordinator is expected to keep tracking you down. So if you find that you're getting a lot of calls, it might be worth replying so that your support coordinator knows that you're okay, because they're actually obliged to make sure that that you've got the supports in place that you need, and that you're doing okay at this point. They may contact your next of kin if they haven't heard from you, so don't be surprised if that happens. And if they really can't get through to you, they might send around the emergency services people. So give them a call back, might be a good idea. But it's great to know that the agency is putting the emphasis on making sure that certainly some that people are being contacted. The other thing too is that just be aware that support coordinators are required to report back to the agency. That's part of their role, to say what types of supports they've put in place and how well they've connected you to those. So when you engage a support coordinator, then it's not just the face-to-face hours that you might engage for. They'll have some background work that they'll need to do as well. So again, communication, check in with them up front. What sort of hours am I likely to need to fund out of my plan to cover this assistance?
Fantastic. And I think we always touch on communication. It is really, really key, whether that's with your loved ones or with your support team, especially with LACs and support coordinators and plan managers. Just keeping in communication. If you don't want to call us back, pop us an email and those sorts of things. And I believe there was one final caveat to some of these updates, Elisa, which was that the NDIA will also be proactively contacting vulnerable participants and or their nominees during this time. So again, if you are contacted by the agency, obviously, as Elisa mentioned earlier, you can ask them outright and quite simply, is this for a plan review? Just to double check, but they may also be checking in just to see that everything is okay for yourself or your loved one that you care for.
And just on that, Mel, super important, there are some of those more unscrupulous people out there who might try to trick you via a phone call. So if you do receive a call from the agency or someone saying they're from the NDIA, get their details, call them, find a way to call them back and verify that they are. Don't give out any personal information over the phone. Just be savvy around that space and stay safe.
Yeah, look, I could not agree more. And of course, if you do have questions for the team at Plan Tracker, we're always here to help and happy to help. Beth, I know you had a question earlier. Can you share this with fellow participants and families in the NDIS space who potentially aren't with us? And that is perfectly fine. These webinar sessions are here to help and support the community at large. We do not expect anyone to be with Plan Tracker to watch these and to gain value. We just want to add as much value as we can for each and everyone in the community. And we always value having Elisa here with us to give us all of this lovely information. So Elisa, I just want to say a huge thank you from myself and from the community for taking the time to do these sessions. I know we ask a lot every fortnight to jump on and spend an hour talking about all of the favourite topics, which we may love or we may not because we've talked about them a lot.
Yeah, don't ask me about transport. Don't ask me about transport. No, look, what I would like to say is that it can be kind of confusing trying to keep up with the changes that the agency pops through, and they tend to do it in ways that we might see information updates in a provider newsletter. They might come through the website. They might come through other channels. So we're doing our best to understand and unpack the information and the policy changes as they come through. I think we'll look back through this season and think, my goodness, how many different things did changed. So if you are watching our webinar series, make sure you keep a note of the dates, because what we said 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago might be different today, and unfortunately often is. But look, I think at the end of the day, if nothing else, try and use some common sense around the spending of your funding. Think about, is what I'm trying to do a disability support? And if in doubt, go back to those participant booklet 3 questions and just answer them for yourself. You can take a note of those. If you're worried about later being asked to justify a purchase that you've made or a decision you've made, just take a note of them. Or if you'd like to, you can use our My Choice My Support's My Choice tool, which is on our website, where we just step you through those questions and then email you out a report, dated report at the end. So hopefully it's been useful. Thanks so much for your questions coming in throughout the week. That really guides the conversation that we're having, or that we have each week. And yeah, until next time, have a great week.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elisa. And if you'd like to reach the team at Plan Tracker, Elisa, myself, and the wonderful Plan Tracker family, as we like to say, you can give us a call on 1800 549 670 or email hello@plantracker.com.au. And until next time, we hope you all have a fantastic day and week ahead. And we look forward to seeing you on another session sometime soon. All right. Thanks, everyone.